Welcome to a new week here on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Micciche. I'm a financial advisor and co-owner of True North Retirement Advisors, a fee-only fiduciary financial advisory practice managing over $425 million in assets. For 17 years, I've helped clients retire with confidence, and my goal on this podcast is to simplify the complexities of retirement so you can focus on what truly matters. Enjoying your retirement years while maintaining financial stability, security, and that all-important confidence that you're going to be okay. I remember having concerns about the U.S. national debt and having conversations with clients about this back in 2011. And at that time, the Standard & Poor's, not to be confused with the S&P 500 index, but similar related ratings agency, Standard & Poor's, which is one of the big three debt rating agencies, along with Moody's and Fitch, they actually downgraded back in 2011. They downgraded U.S. debt from AAA, which is the highest credit rating, to AA+, which is like one notch down. This was a big deal because it was the first time that the S&P ratings agency downgraded U.S. sovereign debt. They had never done that before. Standard & Poor's commented at the time. Now, mind you, this was in 2011. So listen for some common threads with what we're experiencing today. So also, I should point out that in 2011, the U.S. national debt was $20 trillion, still a very high figure, but a far cry from the nearly $37 trillion of today's national debt load. Okay, so here's what Standard & Poor's said after issuing that downgrade. Quote, the outlook on the long-term rating, debt rating, in other words, is negative. So they lowered the debt rating, but then they also said, you know what, we might lower it even further. They said we could lower the long-term rating to AA from AA+, so another notch down, within the next 2 years if we see that less reduction in spending than agreed to, higher interest rates, or new fiscal pressures during the period result in higher general government debt trajectory than we currently assume in our base case. Okay. There's a lot to unpack there, but let's just look at a few key terms. Higher debt trajectory, yet check. If you look at a chart of the U.S. national debt, even since this time, it's like hockey stick level growth upwards. They said less reduction in spending. In other words, they want to see government spending kind of get reined in. And if that doesn't happen, then that doesn't bode well for the ability for the U.S. government to continue to pay on its obligations long term. Hence, it would cause another rating. So less reduction in spending. I don't know, that's kind of like a double negative. They want to see a reduction in spending. Has that happened? Absolutely not. Another check. Then they mentioned higher interest rates. They said that, that could also put pressure. Now, in 2011, from that time, for the next 10 years or so, that didn't happen, but we've now seen that come full circle, and today we have higher interest rates. So check. So it's no surprise that Moody's recently downgraded U.S. debt. I believe Fitch did the same thing, I want to say back in 2013. These are pretty mild downgrades. If you've been paying attention to financial news in the last few weeks, you've seen this because it did make headlines where Moody's did downgrade U.S. debt. But what is most interesting is that this was 14 years ago that Standard & Poor's is saying these things. Higher debt trajectory, that's problematic. No reduction or less reduction, in other words, not disciplined government spending, that's a concern. That has happened, and now we have higher interest rates. So the national debt has only ballooned since 2011. So what does that mean for you as an investor, you as somebody planning your retirement? That's what I'm going to talk about this week. Because the U.S. national debt isn't like you or I having debt. It's quite different. If you and I don't have enough income coming in to pay our debts, we don't have money trees. But the U.S. government has its own personal money tree, and that can work up to a point. So together, we're going to explore what the national debt is, the problems with an increasing U.S. national debt, how and why that might matter for investors, and especially retirees. So I'm going to unpack all of that, talk about why this is a problem, how it can impact you, how it's likely to impact you probably within the next 10 years or so as all of these problems, the can has been kicked down the road, but it looks now that we're at the point where we just can't continue to whistle past the graveyard. So I'll talk about that. I'll talk about what you can do to help protect yourself as well. So come on back tomorrow. I'm going to define clearly, make sure we're all on the same page. What do I mean when I say the national debt? We'll talk about just how high the debt is, how much is climbing every single second. I mean, it's probably gone up at least a couple $1,000,000 just in this episode. So come on back tomorrow. We're going to just establish the foundation of what is the national debt and what does that mean. My name is Ashley Micciche, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips Podcast.